What is going on, guys? It's Halsey Schider with the Helicopter Podcasts. And as always, big shout out to MHM Publishing and the Vertical HeliCASTS platform for making this podcast possible. Love the fact that I'm part of the Vertical HeliCASTS, and I said it before and I'll keep saying it because I'm obligated to do so, that you should go and check out the rest of the podcasts on the HeliCASTS platform. Not that I'm just obligated. They're actually awesome. It's a very diverse platform. We have everything from public safety and law enforcement with the Hangar Z. We have maintenance, which actually, maybe Jake, you should check out the MRO podcast we're doing now. And then, of course, we have the Real Rescue with Jason Quinn, which is, he's rescue swimmer number 500 in the Coast Guard. And he talks to a bunch of badass guys and gals that are still kind of in that world. So check out the Vertical HeliCASTS platform. I'm just grateful to be part of it. Today's guest is coming from, I guess, what did Wes introduce us, Jacob? Is that how that worked?
Yep. Yeah.
So I got Mr. Jake Tuck on. Jacob, welcome to the Helicopter Podcast. We threw this together pretty spontaneously, so thank you so much. Where are you, on the East Coast, West Coast?
Yeah, East Coast. I'm actually in New York right now.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I was this morning. I got your email and it was like, I can do the 20th, which is tomorrow, and I had just woken up. I'm on the West Coast and I didn't have enough coffee. So I'm like, we can do today. And then it wasn't today. And now it is today. So it's just worked out really good. I appreciate you being flexible. So really excited to chat with you. Looking at your background here, it looks like, maintenance background, also now working as a pilot. So just really kind of curious to hear more about you. So let's just start there. Give us a little insight of who you are and what you do, and we'll see where the conversation takes us.
Yeah. I got into aviation just as I started going into college. I was interested in it as a kid, but really never got the opportunity to pursue it until I looked into different careers. And so I attended Pennsylvania College of Technology, where I went through their maintenance program, and ended up getting my A&P there, and went on to work for a Part 145 Robinson repair station. And while I was working there, I ended up getting my IA inspection and authorization stuff. And so I kind of pursued the maintenance side of aviation for the good beginning of my career. I would say about 4 years. And during that time, I started to be a little bit more interested in the flying, and started taking fixed wing lessons, and pursued that career all the way up through to where I'm at now. And I'm flying for Delta Airlines as a first officer based here in New York.
That's awesome. I'm actually excited to kind of talk about the whole airplane thing because it's fascinating. We don't actually talk a ton about it.
Yeah.
Granted, it's the Helicopter Podcast, so it makes sense. But we're going to talk about it all today. We're going to talk about the maintenance, the flying, and everything. Something that I'm interested in, and something that you should know about our audience, is a lot of our audience is younger guys and gals, I think, that are kind of in the process of starting their journey in aviation. And it sounds like you've had interest in aviation as a youngster, as most of us do.
Yeah.
That usually leads to direct going to the pilot route. What was it about the maintenance side that you were fascinated with? Were you always a bit of a tinker? Did you enjoy working on cars? Or was it just kind of like this random thing? Walk me through that.
Yeah, no, I always loved to work on all kinds of things. I had four-wheelers, dirt bikes, and all that kind of stuff growing up. And I just really love to do things with my hands. And so the flying aspect of things kind of seemed a little bit out of reach financially to me at the time, just because I didn't really see a pathway. I had no one really guiding me in that way. And so I decided to just go with the maintenance side of things. And I figured that might be a pathway of getting into flying later in my career. So that's kind of the reason why I picked that. And I also thought it would kind of lay a good foundation for me to kind of build up my knowledge through, no flying, just being able to understand the machine a little bit differently. So that's kind of the reason why I did it that way. And it ended up working out to get into my flying stuff. I didn't end up going the helicopter route just because I didn't see like the financial outcome of it. I didn't have a good pathway for getting a job in that way. So I think that's the reason why I went with fixed wing. But I think maybe in the future I'll probably pursue flying helicopters eventually. But I think I'm gonna stick with the fixed wing as my primary job, and then I love helicopters, so that's why I keep working on them, keep my hands dirty doing that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I want to dive deeper in that, but before we go there, so safe to say then, because of the path and not really having this idea of path, are you kind of a first timer within your family going into the aviation space?
Yeah, definitely.
That's cool. Yeah, my buddy Eli, who's been on the podcast, Eli Malloy, you can check him out. Eli, the heli guy on Insta. Yeah. He came up with this term on the podcast called like first generation pilot, which I really like, which was him, which was me. And I think that one of the cool parts about today is exactly what we're doing right now is we're podcasting and we're talking about your path. And I get to talk to all these other people and their path. And it really helps us first gen guys really kind of understand the route that we should be taking, right?
Yeah.
Should we go to maintenance school? Should we go helicopters? Should we go airplanes? It's very interesting. Something that I haven't talked a ton about on the podcast, but this is kind of interesting, but different from you, is I never thought about helicopters ever. All I thought about was aviation, and it was airplanes. It was 100% airplanes. I was flying airplanes. I soloed on my 16th birthday before I drove a car by myself. I mean, I was that, my group of friends in high school would be like, oh, airplanes flying over. What is it, Halsey? You tool? But I was obsessed, right? I worked at airports. I worked line service. Even to this day, I can impress all my friends with my extreme ability to point out types and makes and models of airplanes specifically. And so I never thought about helicopters. And it was just a birthday present that I got, a demo flight. And I took it on my 18th birthday, I think it was, maybe 19th. And it was like hook, line, sinker. I was like, man, I flew the helicopter. And so I looked at it from the wrong reasons, right? I looked at it from the non-financial. And I've often said that. I've often said like, man, I wish helicopters weren't so fun to fly because I would have just been on the financial track of being, an 18 or 19-year-old person, well on my way, getting into the airlines at a young age. And probably by this time now, 36-year-old dude, I probably would have had some seniority and, making a good living, and here I am now, just a helicopter dork doing helicopter things. And I'm very happy. I'm stoked on how my path laid out. But if you're listening to the podcast right now and you're kind of on the fence about, airplanes or helicopters, Zach and I actually just did an episode and we talk about salaries being a big part of that. So I don't expect you to tell us what you're getting paid, but, most great helicopter jobs are somewhere like in the low six figures. And that's not very much money, unfortunately, especially with how expensive everything is today. And I know that the airlines are so much better. So I think you made a great decision. But we can both agree that helicopters are at least more fun to fly.
They're pretty cool. Yeah. I'm hoping that my career will fund my passion and obsession with helicopters.
I got some clients that seem to be doing pretty well. And then I asked what they do. And they're like, I fly for Southwest. Yeah. And I'm like, that's amazing. Yeah. Because I sell aircraft, obviously, as my full-time school. Yeah. So deal with some airline guys that are flying helicopters. Now, you went the college route for obtaining your A&P. Obviously, there's different ways to do it that way. You can do kind of an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
Tell me about what that experience was like. How long was the course? What was the course like? What did you like about it? What did you not like about it? What was different from what you expected?
Yeah. So basically, the program that I went through, it was kind of they call it a 2+2. So the first 2 years, you basically focus on your A&P. And the way that they do it, it's a time based thing. So 5 days a week, you go into the local airport, which the school had a kind of a it was sectioned off just for the college, and all the kids would go there, and you would do tasks, and it was all time based. So for that first 2 years, you had to spend, I think it was. I don't remember the exact number of hours spent, but there's a specific amount of hours spent per rating. So your airframe and power plant, and then at the end of that 2 years, you would take your basically kind of like a check ride or test.
Mm-hmm.
You do an oral and practical, and you would get your license that way. And then the second 2 years of my degree was more focused on the avionics side of things. It wasn't actually a license, but you got trained up on more of the electrical and avionics side of maintenance.
So what did that leave you with? Was it leaves you obviously with an A&P certificate at that time, but did you also graduate with some type of degree?
Yeah, I got a bachelor's in science and aviation technology at the end
Nice.
of that. Yeah.
And that was probably something that was useful for the airlines because
Yeah.
I do know that at least was a requirement. I heard that it's kind of maybe relaxing as a bit of a requirement having a 4-year degree, but
Yeah.
that's also another consideration why I chose helicopters. I was like, man, I don't want to go to college.
Yeah, I was the same way. I didn't really have a desire necessarily to go to college, but when I saw that I could get a degree in something that I love so much, like aviation, I was like, you know what? I think that'll help me further down the road in my career.
100%.
Yeah.
What was school like? I mean, obviously, I know you kind of just gave me the rundown, but for instance, for me, like you said, you loved tinkering, you liked, getting your hands dirty and working on things. And so there's probably like this idea of like, oh, I'm going to go to the school and I'm going to be tinkering and fixing things all the time. And that's part of it, I'm sure. But I want to hear more about like the stuff that wasn't so fun.
Yeah. So
help my listeners kind of understand, like, just like flying, like there's, 50% or more is ground, whereas the other is the actual fun part, which is flying.
yeah, exactly. We had classes all based on like, manual research, learning how to read different types of manuals. We even had classes on like just learning the FARs and all the rules and regulations of it, learning how to write logbook entries and all that kind of stuff. And that was all classroom work. And then on the later after the classes were done, so you would normally spend the mornings doing maintenance stuff, and then at night you would go to normal classes, math classes, English classes, all that stuff to get your degree. So they paired it together well, where it was a lot of hands-on, but there was a lot of classroom work as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. And that's probably a good balance. But again, it's still going to college, right? So if you're listening to the podcast and you're like, man, I'm just going to go to flight school and it's part of a degree program and it's just going to be fun and flying, it's still a lot of work because you got to do all the ground. And if you're doing a college course, you're doing your English literature and everything else that goes into, the college side of it. I've never actually asked anyone this, and I'm probably asking you to go kind of way back, but when you took your exam, you said it's a written exam, and I was familiar with that there is a practical side of it.
Yeah.
What does that mean? And what does that look like? What was your tasks that you had to do and perform in front of this examiner?
Thank you to our sponsor, Vertical Aviation International. Are you ready for the largest vertical aviation show in the world? Verticon, formerly HAI HeliExpo, is coming to Dallas in March. With over 15,000 professionals and 600 companies in attendance, this is an event you don't want to miss. If you're interested in exhibiting, contact sales at verticalavi.org. That's sales at verticalavi.org. See you at Verticon.
Oh man, this is kind of a ways back, but if I remember, one of them was I had to time a magneto, and then another one was identifying a couple types of corrosion. So they had like a fuselage in a hangar, and he would have you go out and you would kind of do like an inspection, and he wanted you to pick out the different types of corrosion. And then I think I also had to troubleshoot. There was a board of like an electrical circuit, and I had to troubleshoot where the fault was.
Okay.
Yeah, I think those were the three. There was more, but
was it pretty easy?
At that point, we had spent so much time, prepping for it, so it wasn't too bad. You know, timing a magneto is pretty straightforward. Once you learn how to do it, it's not too difficult. So I don't remember it being anything crazy. Once you learn how to do it, it's pretty easy.
Yeah, it's like you're well prepared, just like anything,
Yeah, it's
right?
just like any.
And I've said that about check rides
Yeah.
too. You know,
Yeah.
like if you're prepared going into a check ride, then it shouldn't be too bad.
Yeah.
Still probably some nerves and things, obviously, because it's a test. Everyone also handles that a little bit differently. I do know a lot of people go that route, go to college, do their A&P, and then they go and they work at the airlines as a mechanic at the airlines, or they're working airplanes. I find it more uncommon that people are going directly into helicopters. Was that always kind of your mental path of like, I'm going to this A&P school and this degree program, and then I want to go and specifically work on helicopters?
Yeah, I always had a passion for it. Once I started getting into, turning wrenches, I liked the idea of how helicopters worked and how many moving parts there were. And so I liked that as a kind of a challenge. And so immediately that's kind of the way I gravitated. And I got in touch with a local helicopter maintenance facility near my house, up near Pittsburgh, where I got to kind of do an apprenticeship in a way. And that's when I really started to fall in love with it. And towards the end of my schooling, I got actually an award to go to the Augusta Westland, the 139 maintenance factory school. So right after college, I went and attended that it was about like a month or two.
Really cool.
In Philadelphia, where I got to get exposure to like a bigger style helicopter.
Yeah, definitely the 139 is a little bit different, just a tad different than your traditional R22 or R44.
Yeah.
Pretty similar, of course, to the R66.
Yeah.
Not. I don't think they could be further apart. I guess they both have a turbine.
Yeah,
the 139 is cool. Augusta Westland's an amazing platform, really.
Yeah.
Now, as a pilot, you go to school. Obviously, the traditional path is flight instruction. So you kind of start, you're on the job training and situation like that. How prepared did you feel during that first maintenance job? Like when it was actually coming time to start wrenching on helicopters at a real business for, real life purposes?
Man. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. You get a good foundation, but there's a lot of variables that you face whenever it comes to maintenance. I knew the basics, but when I got out into the field, there was a lot of things that technically you wouldn't know without experience. And so I definitely had to be mentored a little bit. But there were times where I would travel to, remote locations to work on people's like private helicopters and stuff like that, where I was by myself, and I really had to kind of lean heavily on just, I guess the training that I had from school and just my, I don't know, I guess judgment on how to do things. Because there's sometimes you'd be out in the field doing work and you didn't have quite the right tool, so you had to kind of make it or figure out how you could complete the task without having necessarily all the proper toolings whenever you're on the road. So I got to gain some real world experience pretty quickly that way.
Sometimes even some MacGyvering, I'm sure.
Yeah,
especially if a helicopter's stuck in a field.
Yep. Yeah.
I've had some MacGyvering moments within the realm of safety and things like that, obviously. But in Texas, there was a time where it was an R44 stuck in a field, and I don't remember exactly. Maybe you can actually like paint the details here, but essentially, like when I would turn the ignition, nothing would happen. And there's this big Texas storm coming within a few hours. And then my buddy Mike, who's a maintenance guy, comes and he figures out like it's maybe the relay or something.
Yeah.
And then our other buddy Chad, who's an electrician, was like, well, why don't we just jump right here? And then that should solve our problem. And so he made like a little bridge and yeah, helicopter started right up. I flew it, 10 minutes to the airport, put it in the hangar, and then they got it, did a full-time or a full repair on it. But I don't know if that's really legal or not, but it got the job done in that circumstance.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's times where you just kind of have to use your judgment. Obviously, safety is kind of a priority when it comes to anywhere in aviation, but you sometimes have to use your judgment to complete the task, but just do it as safe as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a similar situation. The first time I ever changed a magneto by myself was in the middle of the field at night, and it was starting to rain, so I propped up my the back of my car with a little tent over top of the side of the helicopter with some lights, and I went to it, and I was able to kind of figure out how to do it. But it was kind of fun to, be put in that situation and kind of test yourself.
Yeah, trial by fire.
Yeah.
Now I talked to Wes earlier, and I was like, Wes, who is this Jake guy anyway? What should I talk about? And his introduction to you was he's the ultimate Robinson guy when it comes to maintenance. So apparently, are you still involved in doing Robinson maintenance, or is this just a reputation that's just preceded you past now going into your airplane career?
No, I still have a passion for doing it. I fly for a job, and I consider my maintenance as my hobby. So I try to spend a decent amount of time with my hands getting dirty, turning wrenches just to stay proficient. But a couple times a month, I'm always working on whether it's Robinsons or fixed wings. But most of my clients that I work with are still Robinsons. So I'm constantly turning wrenches on Robinsons.
So you're still doing that. And so how many years now? I guess how old are you?
I'm 32.
32. So how many years? When did you graduate? 20. It's been about 10 years since you graduated college.
Yeah, 9 years. Yeah.
So essentially, you've had about 9 years of working experience.
Yeah.
What is that like now? Like when someone like new is coming in, if you were to mentor a new Robinson mechanic today, what are some of like the emphasis points that you're instilling in that person?
I would say obviously go to, once you start working, try to get to the Robinson maintenance factory school. That definitely gives you a good exposure to how, a piston helicopter works and all that stuff. So, I mean, if there's a maintenance facility that's willing to pay for that and send you to that school, I think that's definitely a valuable thing. If you have to go, send yourself to it and pay for that out of pocket, that potentially could be a good avenue. It just depends on kind of what you're looking for. Because you don't have to, the nice thing about getting your A&P, you don't have to specialize on one airframe. So, Robinsons could, if you're looking to go helicopter specifically, that could be a way to, go that route, or, just work for any maintenance facility. And eventually, probably a Robinson's going to come through there because it's such a heavily used in the GA world.
Totally. Yeah, it's a factory school for mechanics and pilots. I always recommend.
Yeah, for sure.
In fact, Robinson Helicopters is a sponsor of this show. So
nice.
Shout out to them. And in the next issue of Vertical magazine, we're going to be, you'll be getting to read a story that I wrote regarding my experience at the R66 safety course a few months back. Even made a video about the experience. So we're excited to share that. And I can only imagine it's really valuable on the pilot side, but I can imagine on the maintenance side, it's probably extremely valuable, especially for a mechanic. Because that's the thing, right? Like I've had mechanics like, oh, who works on your 44? It's like, oh, the airplane guy here on the field. And then that's always a bit of like that's not great, and usually what it means is like maybe certain SBs are missed. Certain things are just not done really well. A lot of the OEM recommended maintenance is not done, but like the FAA required annual is done. So things like that I think are so important. And I think if you're working on a helicopter and you're type specific, you should be really familiar with, what does the OEM say for maintenance and things like that. Now I know that you have your IA now, so you have your inspector authority. Essentially, that allows you to sign off an annual. What is the process of, and maybe more, and you can inspire me on that too, but what is the process of, going from A&P to getting your IA as well?
Yeah, so it's kind of a more of a experience type license. So you have to spend 2 years working as a full-time mechanic. And then you have to just basically go take a written test. So it's really not super difficult. At this point in my career, it would be hard for me to get if I didn't already have it, just because I'm not turning wrenches full time. So I would have to go back to doing that full time to be able to move into the inspection. So I'm really happy that I was able to get that. And it's super valuable. I think it makes you way more marketable as a mechanic. And it's just something that if you're a A&P, it's definitely something to pursue.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I know that pilot certifications don't necessarily expire unless it's like a CFI certificate. Does the A&P or IA, is there any type of like every 2 years you got to have X amount of hours or anything like that?
Yeah, exactly. So for your IA, it's kind of like if you have like a CFI, every 2 years you got to renew it and get re-upped. But there's different requirements to be able to do that. It really depends on how you want to do it. You can either do so many inspections or sign off so many 337s, any kind of stuff like that, or you could also do training. They have like classroom trainings every year. You can go through like 8 hours worth of training, and then at the end of every odd year, you submit that paperwork to the FAA, and they
makes sense.
Yeah, they re-up it.
Something that I've been kind of trying to push some of my maintenance friends into selfishly,
Yeah.
is becoming a DAR, designated airworthiness representative. I do a lot of international aircraft sales.
Okay.
And it's hard to find a DAR that you work well with. In fact, funny story, the guy that I do the most business with is Canadian, and he lives in Toronto. He's one of 3 FAA DARs that's non-US resident. I think, have you thought about going that route and working as a DAR?
Bell Training Academy proudly supports Vertical HeliCASTS. Experience hands-on technical training with dedicated maintenance aircraft to keep your skills sharp and your Bell aircraft operating at peak performance. Register for a technical course by September 30th and get $100 to Bell's gift shop. Visit bell.co/training.
Maybe potentially in the future. I would say exactly. The last 2 years, I've been really focusing on my flying, but I'm kind of transitioning back into doing more and more maintenance. So maybe in the future that'd be kind of a goal or something for me to pursue. But yeah, I think it's kind of limited by what the FAA wants. So I don't think you can just go get it. You have to be
you have to apply, and it's a process.
Yeah,
but apply early.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not a bad idea.
I think it's valuable. I wish you should do it.
Yeah,
because I know a guy that sells a lot of aircraft that would probably keep you busy.
Yeah. Okay.
And they charge a crap ton of money, man.
Yeah.
And then there's different ranks, right? There's like different things that you can and can't do. And the helicopter side is even more nuanced, right? So there's less helicopter guys, right? Like recently I had to get an export C of A for MD 500 going from US to the Philippines. And, I look up DPEs in Arizona, and there's like 9 of them. I call every single one of them, and they're like, no one can touch airplanes or helicopters except one guy.
Wow.
Like, oh, this one guy is the helicopter authority. So it's not just even like the fact that there's not that many. It's even smaller on the helicopter side, and then they go up with like different privileges. Like we just brought an aircraft over from Germany. Some of the EASA STCs weren't familiarized with the FAA, so then we had to either remove them and put in the original equipment for the type certificate. We could have had the EASA STC holder familiarized, and that would cost money and take time. Or you find the right DAR that has all the privileges, and they do a field approval from their desk, which is great. So, and they get paid well. So I've just been encouraging my maintenance friends to go that route.
Yeah. Okay.
Just a fun thought for you.
Look into it.
All right, so you have your IA. You're still working. What are you seeing? I'm very love Robinson helicopters. Learned on them. Have a great relationship with the company. I think it's pretty exciting recently with their leadership changes and ownership changes, and I think Robinson's going in a fun direction.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to demean Robinson in this question, but I'm just curious of what are a lot of the things that you're seeing that are maintenance issues kind of consistently through your clientele? And is it because of a component issue? Is it because private owners maybe don't, properly own aircraft correctly, if that makes sense? Like what are some of the consistent issues that you're seeing?
Oh, that's a good question.
I'm full of them.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of all over the place, but for the most part, the Robinsons, they're a pretty good machine. I feel like it's a great, like, I shouldn't say entry level helicopter, but it seems like a lot of people obviously use them for like flight training. So they take a lot of abuse, especially with all that the different types of flying that you do whenever you're doing flight training. So as far as like major issues, it's just the wear and tear. Occasionally I see some issues with cooling and like valve sticking. It's just, I guess it's the way that the aircraft is designed. It doesn't get a lot of cooling back there. So, proper warm ups, proper cool downs really saves the engines. So, I mean, those are probably some of the bigger issues.
Yeah, I've heard of a lot of stuck valves.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're exactly right. If you're listening to the podcast, wait for your CHT to get into the green. And then I think one of the issues too is like, I think a lot of flight schools, including the one I was at, was teaching like a 2-minute cool down, but it's really not like a 2-minute cool down. It's what is it again for the 44s? Is it like 300 CHT or less? And like, I think a lot of people, especially like on a hot day, if you're operating in Texas or a hot place, it's like, oh, there's 2 minutes. And then they, turn off and then you get the buildup in the cylinder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think, like you were saying, that's one of those things that sometimes maintenance personnel kind of overlooks is every 300 hours, there's a valve inspection and, it potentially could get missed. And so that's something that could, help prevent those sticking of the valves.
And that's what the SB 388 or something like that?
388, yep.
Yep. So again, he knows his OEM required maintenance and he's doing that, which is great.
Yeah.
That's obviously coming through lie combing and doing the valve wiggle. What is I have an imagination of like what a valve wiggle looks like, but I have no idea what it actually looks like.
It's not much. You can't hardly even tell. Yeah.
So like, how do you set it up? What are you looking for? I just don't even get it, to be honest.
Yeah. So you take, without getting into too much details, you just take the rocker cover off and you take the valves out, and they should be able to slide in and out. But anyways, you hook a caliper on it, and it just pushes up against it, and then you wiggle it and make sure that the proper amount of clearance is there.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
One of the things that I see a lot of Robinson helicopters through pre-buys and things is like servos. Do you see like a lot of leaking servos?
Yeah, all the time, especially in different, temperatures. If it's really cold out or anything like that, you end up getting some leaking. I find that to be, I guess, somewhat common. There's not a whole lot of stuff that I can do with that. That's more of a remove and you get it sent back and then they rebuild it. If it leaks from the top a little bit, that's common. The bottom is where it's like a no-go, can't be leaking.
Yeah, an issue. Yeah. I've seen it where it's kind of minimal. I've seen it where it's getting on the mounts on the gearbox. And it's real corrosive and it starts eating away on like the rubber there. And obviously, that becomes an issue. But yeah, I mean, by and large, man, I'm very impressed with Robinson. I've always said that because you see some of these Robinson. I got a buddy of mine. He'll remain nameless, but his Robinson helicopter is a tractor.
Yeah.
And he uses and abuses the aircraft to the point where I don't get in that helicopter personally.
Mm-hmm.
But man, the thing keeps flying, right? Yeah. It's like, it's really crazy. And I think one of the issues with Robinson is just that it's a lot of private owners, and it's still a helicopter. It's not necessarily as straightforward as, owning a Toyota or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important. Like if you're listening to the podcast and you have the means to buy a helicopter and you're thinking about buying a 22 or a 44 or 66, it's a great idea. Also call me. I can help you do it. But also link up with someone, like Jake, that's a professional in the field of maintaining Robinson specific aircraft. If you own an airplane and you're like, hey, my mechanic's great, I bet he's awesome for your 182. Maybe not so great for your helicopter. So, make sure that you're having the right person, working on the aircraft. All right. So to transition away a little bit from maintenance side of it, again, this feels a little weird talking about it because this is the helicopter podcast, but it would probably be nice to hear the perspective and for our listeners that might be kind of on the fringe, or maybe they want to do both. I have a lot of friends that are dual rated, a lot of friends that did the military route that were able to get funding on both sides, and now they're dual rated folks. Tell me about, when you started going to flight school, how you chose your flight school. And I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about your aviation path since graduating flight school.
Yeah, so I started flying while I was turning wrenches, just a couple hours here and there, and that whole process for me to get my private ended up taking me about a year, just because I wasn't really pursuing it as a career, more of a hobby. And once I started to really see that it was something that I wanted to pursue as a career, I decided to look into a more serious pathway than doing it just the Part 61, here and there at a mom and pop shop. And so I decided to go to ATP flight school in Charlotte.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so that was a great choice for me at the time, just because one, I already had a degree. So, going through an affiliate program with a college, I really didn't need the degree. So I was trying to just kind of save money wherever I could, but I was also trying to do it as fast as I could. And so going through ATP, I was able to take out a little bit of a loan, and I was able to do it basically at my own pace and as fast as I could. And so I spent about 6.5 months getting all my ratings all the way up through MEI, and started instructing as a CFI until I was able to get on with a regional carrier. And
yeah, that's crazy, right? I mean, ATP, if you're listening and you're unfamiliar, ATP is kind of known for they have locations all over the United States, and they're known for their accelerated program.
Yeah.
What was that? Was that pretty? That must have been a pretty, because you're saying like you were dabbling in flying. Did you have at least your private going in, or?
Yeah, I had my private and I had 80 hours.
Okay. So you had it wasn't like completely new, but they take brand new, right?
Yeah. They'll take you from 0 all the way to CFI. And I think that takes somewhere around 11 to 10 months. But it's still, it's pretty fast. You really got to almost give it, it's a full-time job. It would be really difficult to be working and doing that at the same time.
And did you instruct at ATP then?
Yeah, I did. I instructed a little bit at ATP, and I also had some people that I knew that had airplanes that wanted me to teach them in their own airplanes. So I did a little bit of both. I was basically getting in any airplane I could just to try to build time.
Build the time.
Yeah.
How long did you have to instruct for until you had the time to get into the airline? And what was your first regional job? What was the interview like? What was that lifestyle like? There's a lot of helicopter guys right now jumping and doing a rotor transition into the airplane world, but then they'd come back because the commuter, I'm not using the right word right now, but kind of beat them up a little bit. So I'm just curious to hear your experience.
Yeah, so I ended up instructing for about a year and a half until I got to, that golden number of 1,500 hours where you have to have that to get to the airlines. And so once I got to my 1,500, I applied for Piedmont Airlines, which is American Eagle, which is American's regional carrier, where I flew the 145. As far as the interview process, it's just like every airline interview. You're gonna apply, and they're gonna give you a in-person interview where you'll go in front of you'll have HR and maybe a chief pilot, and they'll sit there and ask you scenario-based questions about yourself, just kind of all different types of questions, just to see, for one, is your knowledge there, and two, is your personality going to fit the company. And the nice thing about it is, at the time when I was going through it, the airlines were really hiring. So I was also able to kind of pick my pathway where, in previous years, that wasn't always the case. Sometimes you just have to go where they'll take you. But I was kind of blessed with being able to pick which airline I wanted to go to as well. So yeah.
And you were in that's the ERJ 145?
Yeah, ERJ 145. That was the first jet I flew.
And what was that training like? And was it pretty exciting going from a piston, what I'm guessing you were flying like a Seminole or something and at the biggest point to then flying a jet with passengers in the back?
Yeah, it was awesome. So yeah, your training, you go through basic ground school training, learning the jet, learning systems, which was really awesome for me because I had that background in maintenance. I really got to excel in the system side of things. I really got to understand that probably a little bit better than some. But I went through all that training. Then you get into a simulator where you learn all your flows, all different types of maneuvers. And then you go on to take a check ride. The check ride is kind of a 2-part check ride. You'll do one, which is maneuvers. And then the second part is more of like an everyday flight, just completion from pushing off the gate to taking off, maybe a couple little like issues that you have to deal with, and then landing and parking back at the gate.
Super cool. Obviously, airline buddies have heard the term flow many times, but for our helicopter people out there, when you say that you're working and learning flows, what is that?
So flows are basically memorized checklists in a way. It's just a pattern of switches that you do every time just to create a safe checklist in your head that you do every single time. And then we back it up by using a paper checklist.
So you do the Piedmont.
Yeah.
You're in the 145. How long did that last? What was your next step? I saw something on your email saying something about NASCAR. Did you take a intermission to go race cars? Or I'm guessing you were flying for the department.
Yeah. So I did Piedmont for 2 years, and that's right around the time when COVID hit. And obviously that was a hard time for the whole industry. And I thought I was going to get furloughed, and I had a buddy that was flying privately for a NASCAR team. And he asked me if I could fill in as a contract pilot. And so, of course, I went to our chief pilot and told him the opportunity I had. And he basically said that at this time, he doesn't look like the industry is going to bounce back really quick. So if I wanted to take a leave of absence and go and fly corporate, I could. And so I decided to go ahead and pursue that. And I flew a 145 for a private company that flew different NASCAR teams. So we would just fly from different races.
Were you flying like majority just teams? Like was it a corporate setup, like the interior, or was this like a bus to get like the pit crew and everyone from A to B?
Yeah, I wish it was the nice corporate jets, but it was more of a bus. It was a normal standard 145 that had the 50 seats. And we would fly everyone from the drivers to family to the pit crew, crew chiefs, all that stuff. And we would have maybe like 2 to 3 teams on each airplane. We had 3 airplanes within the company. And then we would just fly them to and from races. And then on the off season, when NASCAR wasn't flying, we would fly college sports teams.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Very cool. What colleges? Any big ones?
We flew Alabama. We flew a couple schools in North Carolina. We flew Clemson, schools like that.
Go Ducks.
Yeah.
So I gotta say, go Ducks. I mean, the $1 million question is when you're flying the airlines, how do you determine who's going to make the pilot announcements?
Oh yeah, you draw the short straw.
Ladies and gentlemen from the flight deck.
Yeah.
And you have to like learn how to do it because I have to say it's kind of funny. It's like everyone has kind of the same cadence of like long-winded? It's like,
Yeah.
it's just kind of is it just because you're just thinking of what to say on the spot, or is there like a legitimate script? How does that all work?
So there's not really an exact script. A lot of the times the captains are the ones that make the announcements, just because they like to, I guess. I don't know. Sometimes they'll have you do it. It just depends. So right now I'm a first officer at Delta. So occasionally I'll make the announcements, but it's normally the captain. And as far as the script, there's a few things that they want us to say, but for the most part, you can say what you want. So maybe some of those long-winded things are just them thinking what to say.
Yeah. I'm like, you want to like take a note or something before you press the
Or
button?
they like to hear their voice.
Now, how do you negate a hot mic situation in that? Is there like a pretty clear illumination of like, hey, you're on the intercom, or what?
Actually, no. I think some aircraft do have that, but ours don't. So I don't know.
That could be a little scary.
You just hope that doesn't happen. Yeah.
You don't want to let your passengers know that you're just up front enjoying Netflix, What? Sorry, I had to ding a little bit at airline pilots, but you guys do watch a lot of Netflix. I know the secrets. I know the innerness of flying airlines.
Oh yeah.
You're flying Delta. You're in an FO position now.
Yeah.
I'm curious, kind of, what is it like to be a first officer working in a 2-pilot crew? It's kind of not uncommon, but fairly uncommon, I guess, in the helicopter world to have 2-pilot crew.
Yeah.
What do you like about it? What could be nuance or struggle about it? And what is it what's the life of an airline pilot look like for you right now?
This podcast is brought to you by HeliCASTS. Tired of listings that go nowhere? Exhausted by tire kickers who waste your time? Don't sell your helicopter alone. HeliCASTS handles the entire process from start to finish. So, if your helicopter is sat too long waiting for a buyer, contact the team at HeliCASTS today for your complimentary market valuation. Call 1-855-HeliCASTS, 1-855-735-5226, or email sales@helicopter.com. HeliCASTS. List it, sell it, done.
Yeah, 2-man crew is awesome. You really get to, especially with where I'm at now, I'm flying with a lot of guys that have a ton of knowledge and a ton of experience because they've been flying for years and years. So I always like to just pick their brains and kind of just learn from them. So as far as being a younger guy in aviation, it's having the 2-man crew is kind of priceless because they're going to pass on awesome knowledge that, you're going to get yourself into situations where they've been in it, many times, so they can easily navigate through it where someone younger would have to kind of just, fumble through it. So learning from those guys is kind of priceless. And, that safety aspect of having someone else there to, relay or bounce ideas off of, it's priceless.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Have you had any moments in the airlines where like things are not going how they should?
I mean, every once in a while you have, small issues where you deal with, small failures and stuff like that. But I've been fortunate. I've never had any major issues.
Well, it helps that you're in an Airbus, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's automated.
No doors are falling off in the back.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that, so.
There you go.
That's good. What are you in again? What is it? The 320?
320. Yeah, we fly the 319, 320, and 321.
And so, are you flying mainly all domestic, or do you have like some international from like Mexico, Canada, things like that?
Yeah, mostly domestic, but we do some Caribbean flying, Mexico, Canada, like you said. But that's I would say 90% of what I do is domestic.
And right now, what does your life look like? I'm maybe assuming that you're a little bit lower on the seniority. How many days a month are you working? What is it like to be an airline pilot?
Yeah, so it's all over the place. You were kind of bringing that up earlier, like as a regional airline pilot compared to where I'm at now.
I couldn't come up with that earlier. I was like, what is it called?
It's definitely a dramatic change. It's just the way that they fly the airplanes creates a different quality of life. The regionals, you're doing a lot shorter flights. You're going up and down a lot more. So your workload for the day is usually a little bit more. And then since they're shorter flights, they end up working you more throughout the month. So you may end up working, 15 to 16 days a month. Of course, as your seniority goes up, you get better schedule, so you can work less. But as far as regionals, that's pretty standard. Where I'm at now, I've definitely seen an increase in my quality of life, just because we're doing more longer flights, so you work less. I may do 1 or 2 legs a day, where the regionals I was doing 4 or 5. And then I'm able to have more days off because I'm flying longer days at Delta. So my normal month is anywhere from, I would say, 11 to 10 days. And then occasionally I'll pick up an extra 2 or 3 days just for a little extra money.
Yeah, it's not bad at all. And you said your domicile is in New York there?
Yeah, New York. I was Atlanta based for probably the last 6 or 7 months, but I recently switched up to New York for the sole reason of better seniority. I get better trips, and I can kind of pick and choose my days a little bit better.
Nice.
Yeah.
And where in New York are you living?
I live in Astoria, New York. I don't know. It's just right by LaGuardia. I'm about 8 minutes from the airport there, so I can just hop on an Uber and go right to the airport.
I was just on the East Coast last week. I love the East Coast.
Yeah, it's great.
I saw New York from a distance. We were driving to White Plains, meeting with our clients that are out of Yonkers. We were at dinner, and I saw the city. I didn't go to the city this time, but I'm so bedazzled, if that's a word, by New York. And I love just New England. It's so gorgeous. We went sailing and did a bunch of cool stuff. Got a lot of clients up there. And so pretty neat. Cross Tech Aviation on your shirt. What's that?
Yeah, that's just a company that I started just doing my freelance maintenance. Since I'm not technically employed as a mechanic for someone, so I kind of started my own freelance thing. I do work closely with, a couple other maintenance facilities in Charlotte, North Carolina, just because that's kind of where I spend a lot of my time. And so I have a lot of great resources working with those different companies there. But yeah, I just started my own, and it allows me to be a little bit more flexible, especially with the way my schedule is. I can kind of schedule, different types of maintenance that I'm going to be doing exactly how I would want to do it, because my days change every month. I work different days, so I kind of fit people in where I can.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. That's cool, and it's cool to have your own thing and do your own thing. How much wrenching are you doing on a monthly basis, would you say?
At one point, I would say too much. I was very busy, so if I had a day off, I was turning wrenches, and it became a little bit too much just because I really had no free time. So I cut back a little bit, but I would say, 3 or 4 times a month, I'm turning wrenches.
And that's how you and Wes connected?
Yeah, exactly. Wes was a flight instructor there in Charlotte and reached out to me. I kind of knew him through another company, and he reached out to me every time there's small little maintenance issues that he has on the aircraft that he flies. So I'm able to just kind of load up some tools in my car and drive over to wherever he's at.
Awesome. Cross Tech Aviation. How can people find you?
Oh man, I'm not super public about it right now, but I'm usually word of mouth. So that's usually how I do it. But
all right, word of mouth.
Yeah.
If you're in that area and you're interested
on the East Coast, I'll travel a little bit.
Okay, on the East Coast, you got a Robinson.
Yeah,
he's a maintenance. You need someone who's sounds like he's pretty good. I can't speak for him, but hear good things. Talk to you about pre-buys once the show's over here. You can contact me, Heli Halsey, on Instagram. Yeah. I can connect you via email with Jake. Jake, thanks so much for coming on. Again, I know that your schedule is a lot. And so, fitting us in and being able to do it today was actually a big help. We really appreciate that.
Awesome.
To our listeners, a little bit of a different one, talking about maintenance today, talking about what it's like to fly in the airlines. A little weird to do for the helicopter podcast, but it's actually all part of aviation, right? It's an option, right? Especially for the guys and gals that are trying to kind of figure out what they want to do. I think that you can have a wonderful career flying helicopters. You can have a wonderful career flying airplanes, and ultimately you make a little more money or a lot more money, flying the airline route. But you might not be kind of doing some of the exciting things that you might be doing on, utility helicopter
Yeah.
flying or fighting fire.
Yeah.
Things like that. But it's just different, and it's a lifestyle change. And honestly, the path of helicopters that I went, I should have just gone airplanes. I mean, it would have been completely different. I'm grateful for my path because it led me to what I do now. So I love helicopters for that. But I've often looked back and been like, man, 19-year-old Halsey should have flown airplanes more. So, Jake, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Any parting words before we sign off here?
No, I really appreciate it. This was kind of a fun experience. I have never done a podcast, so this is.
You did great, man. You killed it.
Thanks.
It was a little challenging getting on there, but to our listeners, thanks again for listening.
Catch you all later. Keep the dirty side down.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you to our sponsor, Vertical Aviation International. Are you ready for the largest vertical aviation show in the world? Verticon, formerly HAI HeliExpo, is coming to Dallas in March. With over 15,000 professionals and 600 companies in attendance, this is an event you don't want to miss. If you're interested in exhibiting, contact sales at verticalavi.org. That's sales at verticalavi.org. See you at Verticon. Bell Training Academy proudly supports Vertical HeliCASTS. Experience hands-on technical training with dedicated maintenance aircraft to keep your skills sharp and your Bell aircraft operating at peak performance. Register for a technical course by September 30th and get $100 to Bell's gift shop. Visit bell.co/training.
This podcast is brought to you by HeliCASTS. Tired of listings that go nowhere? Exhausted by tire kickers who waste your time? Don't sell your helicopter alone. HeliCASTS handles the entire process from start to finish. So, if your helicopter is sat too long waiting for a buyer, contact the team at HeliCASTS today for your complimentary market valuation. Call 1-855-HeliCASTS, 1-855-735-5226, or email sales@helicopter.com. HeliCASTS. List it, sell it, done.